Who on the 2026 Philadelphia Eagles roster could come close to breaking some franchise records? We'll talk about it on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day, and thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. Today's episode is brought to you by Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try it for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we're going to talk about some Eagles players on the offensive side of the ball that could come really close this year to breaking some franchise records or getting up there in the top 10, top 5 all-time franchise numbers. Plus, later on in the show, Bryce Huff, the former Eagles bust of a free agent signing in 2024, he called out the Eagles and their fan base on a podcast this week. Later on, too, we'll also give you an update on our all-time Eagles team tournament. All that more coming your way on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. But I want to start with talking about some records because Jalen Hurts is going on his 7th year in Philadelphia. Dallas Goedert is going on year 9. This is going to be DeVonta Smith's 6th season in the NFL. 6th season in Philadelphia. Pretty unbelievable. Saquon Barkley heading into his 3rd year in Philadelphia. And not only have these guys now been in Philly for years and years, but they have accomplished a lot together, both as a team, winning-wise, and individually. These guys have been dominant over a consistent stretch of 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons in this market. So when you look at their numbers, a lot of these guys are getting up there in the record books. Who of these core pieces on the offensive side of the football could break records in 2026, or who could come really close? On defense, there's really nobody to talk about because the defensive core is so young, and these guys have only been in Philadelphia for a couple years. But this offensive core, a lot of them have been together since 2021, going on like 6-7 years. Dallas Goedert, he's almost been in Philadelphia for a decade. That really makes you feel old. It feels like just yesterday it was Brent Selleck and a young Zach Ertz as your tight end duo, and now Dallas Goedert is the old man veteran that Brent Selleck was for Zach Ertz, that Zach Ertz was for Dallas Goedert. And Dallas Goedert, when you look at the record books, when you look at his total receptions, touchdowns, receiving yards, he is up there not just with the best of the best at tight end, but at wide receiver in general. So Dallas Goedert normally gets about 45 to 60 receptions a year. When he's healthy and plays at least 13 to 14 games in a regular 17-game season, Dallas Goedert normally gets like 45 to 60 catches. If he gets that reception mark again this year, which I think is very possible, I think it's very likely, even though there's more mouths to feed, there's a lot more pass catchers to spread the ball around to, and in the Sean Mannion offense, it is going to emphasize spreading the ball around more than you had when it was A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert leading the way. Now it's going to be more of a committee approach, but A.J. Brown is gone. Mekhi Lemon and Eli Stowers, they are rookies. Hollywood Brown and Dontavian Wicks have been nothing more than role players throughout their history, their career in the NFL. So Dallas Goedert, I feel like it's very likely he'll hit that floor, that baseline of what he normally gets, which is, again, around like 45 to 60 catches. If you told me he had more, I wouldn't be surprised at all. If he does that, he can move. If he gets that like 45 to 60 catch output, he can move inside the top 5 all time in receptions in Eagles history. Like, that's pretty incredible considering the legacy of Zach Ertz and how much it is highlighted because, you know, he helped you win your first ever Lombardi trophy and how he's only 11 receptions away from breaking the Eagles all-time receptions record held by Harold Carmichael. Zach Ertz, and he was the guy right before Dallas Goedert. Like, Zach Ertz is the guy we always talk about with legacy at tight end, but Goedert, like, his legacy is underratedly building into one of the best to ever do it at this position and one of the best to ever catch footballs in the city of Philadelphia. I mean, he is really close to getting inside the top 5 all-time in Eagles history in receptions, and so is DeVonta Smith. So, interestingly enough, just in year 6, Smitty this year, if he has the kind of breakout JSN caliber, Deshaun Jackson 2013, Jeremy Maclin 2014, A.J. Brown 2022, Terrell Owens 2004, if Smitty has that next all-time great receiving season for the Eagles as the alpha number one guy that really truly breaks out this year as a star go-to player in an offense, Smitty also in year 6 can move inside the top 5 all-time in receptions. He actually can move inside the top 3 in receptions this year if he has at least 65 catches. So he can be inside the top 3 in receptions already. 3 years shorter than what it took for Dallas Goedert to get close to that range. And he can be top 5 all-time in receiving yards if he has a 1,300-yard season in 2026. So he doesn't even have to have that. He doesn't even have to have that JSN 17-plus 100-yard offensive player of the year kind of season that Jackson Smith and Jigba had in 2025 to put himself inside the top 5 in Eagles history in receiving yards. If he gets that 1,250, 1,350 in that range total yardage this year, Smitty's going to be up there in the record books. And when you also add on to the fact that he already is your all-time leading receiver in the playoffs, I mean, these guys are building team and maybe pro football Hall of Fame caliber careers on top of all the winning you've done, making it to 2 Super Bowls as a core on offense, winning a championship, ending a Chiefs dynasty that almost was on the verge of getting a three-peat, the first team that had a chance of ever doing that in the history of the NFL that at least got that close. Those guys are building some ridiculous legacies, and I think it's very likely that both Dallas Goedert and DeVonta Smith move inside the top 5 this year in receptions and for Smitty receiving yards. And that's incredible. Like, these guys, I feel like their legacies are very underrated in Eagles history because for Smitty, he's been behind A.J. Brown for 4 years and only really had 1 season as a rookie as the go-to wide receiver 1. And for Dallas Goedert, he's following up the act of the greatest tight end in Eagles history. Zach Ertz is one of the best players to ever do it and caught the game-winning touchdown in your first ever Super Bowl victory back in 2017 in Super Bowl 52. So those guys are building their legacy, and 2026 can really cement their legacies as all-time Eagles legends. For Jalen Hurts, he can actually, interestingly enough, in year 7 as the Eagles quarterback, the face of the future, he could actually break a record. Jalen Hurts is only 6 rushing touchdowns away from breaking Steve Van Buren's all-time rushing touchdown record of, I believe it's 69. Jalen Hurts has 63. So Jalen Hurts needs 6 touchdowns to break it. He needs 5 touchdowns to tie Steve Van Buren. He needs 6 to break it. Well, Jalen Hurts has had double-digit rushing touchdown seasons in every year he started except for last year when he definitely ran a lot less than he normally does. Even last year, if he does what he did last year again this season, rushing touchdown-wise, he had 8 last year. Still really good amongst, comparatively speaking, 8 rushing touchdowns compared to what other rushing quarterbacks are doing. That's still pretty damn good. If he gets his normal output this year, maybe he runs even more. Maybe the tush push makes a return with the improvements of the offensive line, and guys like Cam Jurgens and Landon Dickerson are a lot healthier, so you can bring that play back a little more than you did the second half of the 2025 season. Jalen Hurts is likely going to be, by the end of this season, the all-time leader in rushing touchdowns in franchise history. A quarterback doing that for Philadelphia, it actually kind of feels right. When you look at the history of the Eagles franchise, the history of their quarterback decisions, the quarterback position in Philly, I don't know. It feels poetic almost that a mobile quarterback's going to lead this team in rushing touchdowns over legends like LaShawn McCoy at running back and Steve Van Buren and, Wilbert Montgomery and Brian Westbrook and now Saquon Barkley. The fact that it's going to be Jalen, I don't know, that's really cool. I mean, this team has always had rushing quarterbacks. Randall Cunningham, Michael Vick, Donovan McNabb, Carson Wentz, now Jalen Hurts. I mean, they like to invest in that kind of player quarterback. And for Jalen to do that in just year 7, because he's had 4 double-digit rushing touchdown seasons already, and last year he had 8, is a really cool story. So Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert, DeVonta Smith, that big three that's been together on offense, that core since the 2021 season when this new golden era started with Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts leading the way, those guys can get up there in the record books all time in franchise history in 2026. And those three are all going to have even bigger roles. They're going to have to carry even more this year with all of the changes on the offense. So I think they're going to do it. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, we got to drag Bryce Huff a little bit. What he said on a podcast about Philadelphia and his experience in 2024, I think it's way out of bounds. But first, today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are presented today by Square, the business platform helping sellers become neighborhood favorites. Whether you're preparing for a busy season or managing everyday demand, Square helps keep your business moving with everything from payments and online orders to inventory, staff, management, and more, all in just one place. So business owners can spend less time managing tools and more time focusing on their customers. Square helps simplify the everyday work behind running a business while giving owners the tools they need to keep growing. And it's something you notice when you're supporting your local businesses. For me, a local coffee shop down the street, a comic book store around the corner, they both use Square, and the checkout process is so quick. It's seamless, easy, in and out action. Square helps you run your business more smooth, bringing payments, operations, and insights together in one place so you're ready for whatever's next. Right now, listeners can get up to $200 off Square hardware when you sign up at square.com/go/LockedOnNFL. That's Square, SQUARE.com/go/LockedOnNFL. Get started with Square and build a setup that works the way that you do. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. And thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Guys, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our Locked On Eagles Everydayer Club. You're going to get our show ad-free Monday through Friday. Plus, you'll become a member of our Discord channel, talking birds with other Eagles fans and myself. It's only $5 a month. If you're interested, head over to LockedOnEagles.supercast.com or LockedOnPodcast.com/everydayer. So Bryce Huff, the former Eagles pass rusher that was signed to a big contract in 2024 that was supposed to replace Hassan Reddick as your go-to future at the edge rusher position, your alpha #1 guy to go after the quarterback. The Eagles invested a lot in Bryce Huff that year. They thought they were getting a diamond in the rough in the UFA pool coming over from the New York Jets. Bryce Huff had some elite pass rushing numbers, as he wasn't a full-time player in New York, but when you look at what he did in obvious pass rushing situations, he was a top 5, top 10 efficient edge rusher in 2022, 2023. He was seen as a rising star in the NFL. And the Eagles, again, he wasn't a full-time player, so a lot of it was a projection. The Eagles were banking on Bryce Huff, the ceiling, not the floor. They were expecting him to become even more than what he already was with the New York Jets, and they paid him accordingly. They let Hassan Reddick go, they traded him to the Jets, and they brought Bryce Huff over to New York. Well, from the jump, it felt like a disaster. Vic Fangio said in May of 2024 that so far Bryce Huff was not the player, basically. Essentially what he said in a nutshell is that he hasn't been the guy they, at least as of yet, that they expected him to be when they signed him in free agency. And that, I think, got in Bryce Huff's head from the start. And Bryce Huff even said it in a podcast the other day that he knew pretty early on in the summer that Philadelphia probably was not the right fit. And I think it is because of those Fangio comments. Not everybody is built to handle that kind of blunt honesty that Fangio presents. And Huff was one of those guys. I feel like it just got in his head and he lost confidence quickly and was not able to adapt to this defensive scheme. And when you combine like what Vic Fangio said on top of the highly competitive, intense sports market that Philadelphia is, clearly Bryce Huff was not meant for this team and this market. If what Vic Fangio said bothered you, playing in Philadelphia is going to be really tough, and that was proven to be the case. He ended up being pretty much a healthy scratch by the end of the year, was a healthy scratch for Super Bowl 59, and Bryce Huff on a podcast the other day let everybody know how displeased he was in Philly. And I think he is totally not justified for complaining publicly about that disastrous season. So this was his quote on the Caps Off podcast. Quote, "It's cool to say I was part of a Super Bowl winning team, but like the way that went down, me finding out that I wasn't playing, I lost so much respect for people involved." And he also said that he knew it wasn't going to be a good fit with the Eagles the, quote, first week of camp. For the fans especially, they like taking pride in going after people. So they were going after Eagles fans on this podcast. Huff said he lost respect for the organization and the way that they handled things. And I don't understand this at all. Like, I will say there were times that year where I made the case that, you know, early on in the season when Bryce Huff was not very effective as an overhang edge rusher, he didn't have his hand in the dirt, was trying to adapt to this new scheme and clearly was struggling. I suggested a couple times, like, let this guy do what he was doing in New York. Clearly it's not working as a full-time player. Let him get his hand in the dirt and just go after the quarterback. Use him in, you know, just pass rush situations. Nolan Smith is breaking out. You still have Josh Sweat. Jalen Hunt looks good. Like, just put him back, although it's, you know, the money makes you want to make him a full-time starter. Clearly he's not that guy, so let's at least try to get out of him what the New York Jets were able to. And the Eagles tried it a little bit around like October, November, and it started to work. And then Bryce Huff just got hurt again. And then by the time he came back, Nolan Smith was on a tear, and so was Josh Sweat and Jalen Hunt. Like, the Eagles had really found their trio of edge rushers in the rotation, so Huff kind of lost his spot by that point. There just wasn't a lot of snaps to go around, and he doesn't play special teams either, so they ended up making him a healthy scratch. I don't see anything that the Eagles did that Bryce Huff should feel upset about. I don't know. Like, I know his pride was hurt, but, I mean, the Eagles paid you a big contract to be the number one guy. Like, they didn't invest in you just to be a rotational player. And you knew Vic Fangio coming in was going to be the defensive coordinator. You should know as Bryce Huff what this scheme is all about. And for you to instantly believe it wasn't the right fit and for you to be upset by the Super Bowl that you were a healthy scratch by that point, how good this defense was playing, and you were injured all year and not playing well the first half of the year. Like, what are we talking about? I mean, I get the Vic Fangio thing. I can get a little bit being upset about that. Like, you just get here, right? You just signed to a new team. You're learning a new defense, and it kind of feels like Vic Fangio pulled the rug out from underneath you. But that's Fangio. Like, you signed with this team. You took that amount of money, and as the number one guy, there's a lot on your shoulders. Like, yes, there is more expected out of you. So even though maybe you didn't love what Fangio said, it's like, I mean, this is the market. This is what it takes to be the number one guy, the go-to guy on the edge. This is what the money is paying you to be, and they expected more out of you, and I feel like they were justified in that. So Bryce Huff, like, going on a podcast, going after fans. I don't even remember fans really attacking Bryce Huff that much during the season. I feel like people accepted pretty quickly that it just wasn't going to work, and they were winning. They were on a Super Bowl run. I mean, they had won 10 games in a row, so people weren't really complaining a whole lot about Huff. So I think he's just bitter about the way things went down, but take some accountability, man. I mean, I really think it was the Fangio comments. I think the minute that happened, he wanted out. He felt stuck, and he just had to basically coast for an entire year. But now he's retired, by the way. So, I mean, clearly it wasn't the Eagles' fault. It's on you. I mean, if you were going to end up being the star that you felt like Philadelphia stopped you from being, and I know he ended up bouncing back pretty well in Robert Saleh's defense, reuniting with him last year in San Francisco. Like, he was pretty solid as a rotational edge rusher, but like, he made it sound like on the podcast that the Eagles are the reason he's not a star in the NFL, and now he's retired. Like, clearly that's not the case. It's on Bryce Huff, and he just took no accountability. And man, that's the rare Howie Roseman miss of the last like 5 years. I mean, he hasn't had a miss that bad in a very long time. But luckily for Howie, even the really bad moves like the Bryce Huff signing, you don't really feel it because he replaced him so quickly with, you know, he had Josh Sweat already. Nolan Smith broke out. He nailed that draft pick of Jalen Hunt in the 3rd round. And then last year you trade for Jalen Phillips. This year you get Jonathan Grenard and Arnold Ebiketie. You're not really missing Bryce Huff. You're not really feeling the pain of that move. And that's the great part about Howie Roseman is, yes, still even to this day, he'll have some misses like that, but he fixes them really, really quick. Bryce Huff, just what a dud, what a loser comment on that podcast yesterday. All right, guys, we'll wrap up this Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, an update from our all-time Eagles team tournament in round 1. But first, today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is presented by Odoo. Running a business should not feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales. Somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know, the Eagles know this for sure, that success isn't just about talent, it's about having everyone working towards the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business. This Eagles run of the last 10 years, winning 2 Super Bowls, getting to a 3rd. It's been an organizational process from top to bottom. This has been about the GM, the owner, the coaches, the players. It's really taken the entire team, the entire organization to have this golden era of Eagles football that we are currently still witnessing. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try it for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. All right, we are wrapping up this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. Time for an update from our all-time Eagles team tournament of 10 of the greatest Eagles teams in franchise history. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I put together a ranking of, and it's not the 10 best teams in Eagles history, but I put together 10 of the best teams in franchise history that have different cores. So I've got some teams from, I have the 1960 championship team here. I've got the 1980 team that won the NFC and got the Eagles to their first ever Super Bowl, led by Dick Vermeil, Ron Jaworski, Harold Carmichael, Wilbert Montgomery. I put in that 1990 squad with Randall Cunningham, Reggie White, Eric Allen, Seth Joyner, Clyde Simmons, that all-time great defense, Wes Hopkins. The list goes on and on. I threw that team in there. Those early 2000s teams, the 2004 Eagles that got to the Super Bowl and lost to the Patriots. Then, of course, the 2017 Birds, the 2022 Eagles, 2024. I threw a couple of those teams, those fun offenses from the early 2010s, the Michael Vick 2010 team, the 27-2 Nick Foles season led by Chip Kelly in 2013. I did some seeding and put those teams against each other and had all of you guys vote on it. If you want to vote on the first round, we still have some matchups going at Locked On Birds or at DiBiase LOE on X. And the polls are also up on our YouTube community page at Locked On Eagles. So let's go to the results of our first round matchups from today. So in round 1, we had the 3-6 matchup of the 2022 Eagles taking on the 6 seed 1990 Eagles, and then the 2004 Eagles taking on the 1980 Eagles. So we had a battle of the first 2 teams in franchise history to ever make the Super Bowl, the 1980 Birds and then the 2004 Eagles. And then we had a matchup that I thought was really fun, the 3 and the 6 seed. It was the 2022 Eagles that made Super Bowl 57, and then that unbelievable Randall Cunningham season of 1990 as the 6. So I put this to a poll. I had you guys vote, and you guys decided that the 3 seed 2022 Eagles are moving on and the 5 seed 2004 Eagles. So you had the 2004 team, Donovan McNabb, Brian Westbrook, Terrell Owens, Andy Reid, Brian Dawkins, that team from the early 2000s that finally got it done in the NFC Championship, taking down Michael Vick and the Atlanta Falcons. You guys said that team was better than the Jaws team that made it to the Super Bowl in 1980. The vote was not really close for that one. I do agree. I think that 1980 team is really fun. What a Cinderella story. Awesome that they were the first ones to make it to the big game. But I agree, like that 2004 Eagles team, one of the 3 to 4 most talented teams in franchise history. And it's a shame that era never got a ring. And if they were going to do it, it was going to be in 2004. So I agree with them moving on. And then you had the 2022 Eagles beating the 1990 Birds. That one is probably my favorite matchup of the first round. What a battle that would be. Like, could you imagine? So you've got prime Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, who still like each other at the time. A.J. Brown, who in 2022 broke the single-season receiving yard record for the Eagles. You've got DeVonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders, an unbelievable offensive line going up against Reggie. Like, that offensive line, Jordan Mailata, Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, Isaac Seumalo, Landon Dickerson, right, in his second year. Maybe the best offensive line in Eagles history going up against, or I would say second or third, like 2017, 2022, 2024. Those are the best iterations of your line ever. Going up against Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, Seth Joyner, Buddy Ryan's aggressive blitzing defense with that secondary they had as well, like Eric Allen, the ball hawk back there in the secondary, Andre Waters, Wes Hopkins, those safeties. One of the best defenses ever put together on paper and on the field. That was my favorite matchup. You guys, by a slim margin, had the 2022 Eagles taking them down. And I do get it because, so that's the strength on strength battle, is the 22 offense versus the 1990 defense. But remember, that 2022 defense was great too. I mean, that pass rush almost broke the 1985 Chicago Bears all-time sack record in a single season. I mean, Brandon Graham had double-digit sacks that year. Josh Sweat did. Hassan Reddick did. Javon Hargrave. You had 4 guys in the double digits. Fletcher Cox was your 5th leader in sacks, and he had 7. Like, Fletcher Cox had a really underrated season in 2022. That year was unbelievable. James Bradbury was an all-pro corner. Darius Slay was a Pro Bowl corner. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson had 6 interceptions. You had a really solid linebacker duo of Kazir White and TJ Edwards. Then they'd go up against an MVP finalist in Randall Cunningham. That would have been just a battle. Like, that would be one of my favorite. Like, if I could pin 2 Eagles teams of all time against each other, that would be one of my favorite matchups. But you guys had the 3-seed 2022 Eagles moving on, and then you had the 5-seed. Hold on, let me confirm the seeds here for this. It was, the 3-seed 2022 Birds against the 6-seed 1990 Eagles, and then it was the 4-5 matchup. So the 2004 Eagles were the 4-seed, and the 5-seed were the 1980 Eagles. You had the 2004 Birds moving on. So the 3-4 seeds both won, headed to the second round. You can vote on today's matchups at Locked On Birds on X or at DiBiase LOE. You can also vote on our YouTube community page at Locked On Eagles. Today's matchups are the 1-seed 2024 Eagles against the 8-seed 2008 Eagles that made the NFC title and lost to the Arizona Cardinals. And then it's the 2-7 matchup, the 2017 Eagles that won the first ever Lombardi Trophy, and then the 1960 Eagles that beat Vince Lombardi for the Eagles' 3rd ever NFL championship. So we'll have the results of those matchups done on tomorrow's show. But that's going to do it for now. This Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thank you so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Until tomorrow, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.